Hello and welcome. I'm Father Nathan Castle of the Joyful Friar podcast here with my sister Cathryn Castle Garcia.
Morning. Or hello.
Hello.
Bon dia.
Yeah, we're still in the Azores. I'm traveling back to Arizona starting this afternoon. But we want to invite you to something we have coming up that I and my team members at my ministry are offering on June 1st and June 8th. Those are both Saturday mornings. We're doing a little book study on this book. It's called Good Goats, Healing Our Image of God. It's written by Dennis Linn and Sheila Fabricant-Linn. They're a married couple, and Matthew. Matthew's a Jesuit priest, and they met during their theological educations a long time ago. They've been working for years on healing of trauma, and much of it having to do with ideas of being unloved or rejected on top of another trauma. Part of what they've discovered in a lifetime of healing ministry is that some people can have similar traumas, but one subset of people stay wounded and stuck in their trauma and don't heal from it, and others do. So they're looking at what might be the cause of that. And one of the things they arrived at was knowing that you're consistently loved, and that someone will accompany you through a healing process is a huge bonus. Anyway, they've written this book called Good Goats, Healing Our Image of God. I'm a lifelong Catholic, and I've never felt like I had to recover from Catholic guilt. I was taught as a child that some people go to hell if they're on God's bad side. They do bad things and are unrepentant. But even while I was being taught that in Catholic school as a first grader, I was also being taught that Jesus from the cross said, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they do." And he didn't pick and choose which ones would be forgiven. He offered universal forgiveness from the cross. Then it's just on us to decide whether we want to trust in that opportunity or not. So this particular book goes to a passage near the end of Matthew's gospel that's had a very large impact on the way that people think about eternity and reward and punishment in our lives and in the universe. There's a passage near the end of Matthew's gospel where Jesus goes into some detail about behaviors that are praiseworthy ones. When did you see me hungry and feed me? When did you see me naked and clothe me? When did you see me unhoused and house me? All of those who did that, step this way to the right. You'll be the sheep because you're my sheep, because you just did everything great. Then in the passage, again, Matthew 25, it says, when did you see me hungry and ignore my hunger? When did you see me naked and not clothe me? When did you bypass an opportunity to visit me in prison? Well, you go to the left. You're the goats. And you'll go off to, the sheep will go on to everlasting joys, the goats off to everlasting punishment. It's as simple as that. So many people have felt like that I'm destined to be a goat, or I'm unloved by God, or something like that. I didn't make the cut. And life can give us many opportunities to think that we belong in that category that's worthless, or that God doesn't love, or some such thing. Anyway, that's an image of God. It's not any image of God is going to be a partial truth, because you can't describe God in one phrase or one image. But this book is small, and it goes into that. I'm going to quote from a little section near the end of it. The three authors were giving a retreat to some elderly Catholic nuns, and one of them raised her hand and said, "But what about that story of the sheep and the goats? It's right there that the sheep go to heaven and the goats go to hell." Dennis responded by asking the whole group, "So how many of you at least once in your life have done what Jesus asked at the beginning of the passage? Fed a hungry person, clothed them, visited a person in prison?" And they all raised their hands. Then he asked, now, how many of you once in your lifetime, at least, have walked by a hungry person, failed to clothe a naked person, or not visited someone in prison? Slowly, all these sisters raised their hands. And Dennis said, that's too bad. You're all goats. Then they looked worried and perplexed. Suddenly, one very old sister's hand shot up and she blurted out, I get it. We're all good goats. Good goats. She understood the language about heaven and hell is symbolic. They're not geographical places, but symbols of inner realities, states of being. Everyone who's felt alienated, unloved, overwhelmed by shame, or caught in addiction knows what it's like to be in hell. Any of us who've been welcomed home have seen our goodness reflected in the affirming eyes of a loved one, someone who's loved us into recovery. We know what it's like to be in heaven. The kingdom of God is within us. We are all good goats. I think you have a picture of a good goat, don't you?
Yes, yesterday we went out on a little bit of a goat hunt in the Azores, and to accompany the workshop, we have some visuals, and there is Nathan with the good goat. Ta-da! And basically the message that he wishes to convey through the study of this Good Goats book is, just because you did a bad thing once, does that make you a bad goat? And to that we say, nah.
I'm trained in, my Dominican training has a lot of Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas in the background, and it's based on a lot of logical argumentation. For example, we are right now facing east. The sun came up over there. And even in the Azores, the sun comes up in the east. For any of you who haven't been to the Azores, it's very consistent. The sun comes up in the east. But I was taught that if you start a logical argument with falsehood or inaccurate information, untruth, all that can flow from it will be untrue. If you want to start an argument or a line of logical reasoning that the sun comes up in the west, good luck to you, because it doesn't. That's not true. It comes up in the east. You might posit a second term, like because the sun comes up in the east, an east-facing room with lots of windows might get warmer than the other part of the house. And then you could argue to proving that because it's on the east and it has a lot of windows, it's warmer here. That's a logical sequence of thought. But if you start with falsehood, you're just going, whatever argument you try to follow is going to be false. What they're trying to do in this book, and what I want to present for your consideration, is what if you have an idea about God and your relationship to God that's less than fully true, that it contains some significant falsehood or is patently untrue? Then a lot of unhappy things are going to flow from that. And some of them might really be the cause of deep unhappiness in a person's life. If you know my story at all, the work that I've done in the Afterlife Interrupted books, the very first one was such a case. Ray, the perfect gentleman, I call him in book one, was angry that dying in a fire when he was 20, newly married and with a little kid, was God's fault, because he had been taught this about God, that people die because God takes them. That was his first premise in an argument in his head, and he had been taught that by his pastor, who he thought was authoritative on such matters. So he moved through life thinking that that's why people die, which probably didn't concern him very much until he died. And then when it did, he was in a big bind. The first thing he said to us was, who the hell does he think he is, taking me just when my life is getting good? So only sad things and anger could flow from that false first premise. So in this little study, we're going to be asking, is there anything in your image of God that might be saddening you or holding you back in some way? Looks like you've got something to add there.
Well, it's basically all about a simple way to change our image of God. If we were taught that God is nothing but judgmental and we either go this way or that way and there's no middle ground, that doesn't leave a lot of room for forgiveness and grace. And I think what you're prescribing is that there's room for forgiveness and room for grace.
Well, and when I ran across this book, I really loved it because it's simple. That doesn't mean stupid. It just means concise. I love it as an author and as a reader when somebody can take complicated material and put it in a form that's clear and plain. And this one has lots of illustrations. It's a book that's about, I think, 90 pages long, but many of them have colored pictures because you can put things in a clear format and children of God can read it, even adult children of God. So I'm inviting you to get a copy of the book. It's on Amazon. It's easy to find. Good Goats. The author's last names are Linn. It's very simple. It's inexpensive. It's quick to read. If any of you don't think of yourselves as having time to read a whole book, I get it. But this one is pretty breezy for the amount of pithy content that it has. So that's why I'm offering it as something for your consideration. What we're asking is that if you would like to take part, we've set it on a Saturday morning in particular, because the last time that we offered something on Zoom, the feedback that we got was, I'd love to take part in person, because we will do Zoom and little breakout sessions where you get to talk to other people in live time. It'll also be recorded, so if it wasn't a convenient time for you, you could always look at it later on your own. But if you'd like to take part, it's on June 1st and 8th at 10 a.m. Pacific. We would like it if you've read the book in advance, and so you're already familiar with the main things that it's doing. It spends the first half of the book explaining out some principles, and then the second half, especially for Catholic and Christian audiences who might have questions about how does this line up with scripture and tradition, they move into that very specifically. So that's what we're inviting you into. Yeah, there you go. So I think for the importance of the topic, they deal with it with such clarity that I just thought you might enjoy it. I find that in both the pastoral counseling that I've done for most of my career and in the afterlife work that I've also done a long time, what I listen for when people state their case about why they are as they are and they're hurting, I listen for illogic. I listen for what doesn't follow, or what if that idea that you have, if you could change it just a bit, would the consequences that flow from it make you happier? So that's really it. We're inviting you into something pretty simple that we think can also have a profound effect on folk who are receptive to it. You got anything to add?
I just hope that you'll all give the book a read and join Nathan on June 1st and June 8th on Zoom. Good Goats, Healing Our Image of God. And I do believe that at the end of the day, we're all good goats.
Me too.
Do the best we can.
Yes.
There's grace and there's forgiveness.
And some of you contact me through email or one way or another and offer to help me in my work. And I don't always know what to do with your willingness. But right now I have something that I would love if you felt like you wanted to help with this. When we do breakout sessions, I like to have some people who are prepared ahead and can kind of facilitate a group of about 4. That would mean having bought the book, read it, and I would send you a little material on some prompts to use in a breakout session. I've also found that when we've done these other little Zooms, things, classes and mini retreats, workshops, that people really, really enjoy the interaction. And it's so cool on Zoom when you go into a breakout session and you're in the US talking to somebody in France or in Australia or whatever. There really is, or the Azores, there's just a universality that can be really lovely if you are able to take part in live time. So that's it for now. We're hoping that you can join us in this little session coming up on Good Goats. You're in my prayers. Bye-bye.